On October 25, 2012, a mother's worst nightmare became reality in the most unexpected way. Marina Krim trusted her part-time nanny with what mattered most in the world, her children. But when she walked through the door of her Upper West Side apartment that evening, she discovered that trust had been shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. This is the story of how Yoselyn Ortega, a woman the Krim family had employed for 2 years, murdered 6-year-old Lucia and 2-year-old Leo Krim with kitchen knives in their own bathroom. It's a case that shocked New York City, changed childcare laws forever, and left a family destroyed by an unthinkable betrayal. The Krim family seemed to have everything. Marina and Kevin Krim were successful professionals living in a beautiful Manhattan apartment. Marina was a devoted mother who documented her family's life through photos and blogging. 6-year-old Lucia, known as Lulu, was bright and full of life. 2-year-old Leo was energetic and playful. They had recently welcomed a third child, baby Nessie, just months before the tragedy. Yoselyn Ortega had worked for the family for 2 years as a part-time nanny. She was 50 years old when she was hired, a Dominican immigrant who seemed reliable and trustworthy. The Krims paid her well and treated her fairly. They even employed her son, Jesus Frias, to walk their dog. To outsiders, it appeared to be a normal employer-employee relationship, but there were warning signs that no one fully understood at the time. Ortega had been struggling with depression and anxiety, conditions her family later admitted they had hidden from the Krims. She had also been complaining about her pay and working conditions, though prosecutors would later argue this wasn't enough to explain what happened next. On that Thursday afternoon in October, Marina Krim made what seemed like a routine decision. She took baby Nessie to Lulu's swimming lesson, leaving 2-year-old Leo at home with Ortega. It was something she had done many times before. When the lesson ended, she expected to find Lulu there waiting for her, but Lulu never showed up. Marina called Ortega repeatedly, but got no answer. Growing worried, she took baby Nessie and headed home to their apartment on West 75th Street. She walked into what she would later describe as a horror movie scene that no parent should ever witness. The apartment was dark, except for the bathroom light. Marina found her 2 children in the bathtub. 6-year-old Lulu and 2-year-old Leo had been brutally stabbed multiple times with kitchen knives. According to prosecutors, Ortega had taken knives from the family's kitchen and repeatedly slashed and stabbed the children before carefully laying their bodies in the bathtub. Marina's screams brought neighbors and the building superintendent running. They found Ortega lying on the bathroom floor next to the children, covered in blood. She had slashed her own wrists and stabbed herself multiple times in the neck and throat with a kitchen knife in what appeared to be a suicide attempt. Unlike the children, Ortega survived. The scene was so horrific that it traumatized even seasoned first responders. A detective later testified that he took crime scene photos nearly 7 hours after Marina discovered the bodies, and the images shown to the jury were so disturbing that several jurors were visibly shaken. If you're finding this case as shocking as we are, and you want to understand the psychology behind these unthinkable crimes, make sure to subscribe to Accused. We dive deep into the dark corners of the human mind that most people prefer not to explore. Ortega was rushed to the hospital and survived her injuries. As she recovered, the city reacted with shock and horror. How could a trusted caregiver, someone who had been with the family for 2 years, commit such a brutal act against innocent children? The case dominated headlines and left parents everywhere questioning their own childcare arrangements. The legal proceedings took nearly 6 years to reach trial. Ortega's defense team argued that she was not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming she suffered from severe mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and possibly psychosis. They painted a picture of a woman who had snapped under pressure, citing her financial struggles and alleged mistreatment by the family. But prosecutors told a different story. They argued that Ortega's actions were deliberate and calculated. Assistant District Attorney Courtney Groves told the jury that Ortega had taken multiple knives from the kitchen and repeatedly stabbed the children before carefully positioning their bodies in the bathtub. This wasn't the random act of someone in a psychotic break, they argued. It was murder in the first degree. The trial began in March 2018, nearly 6 years after the murders. It was expected to last 15 weeks and was an emotional ordeal for everyone involved. Marina Krim's testimony was particularly heartbreaking. She described the moment of discovery as like a horror movie and told the jury that Ortega had killed her best friends, referring to her children. Kevin Krim also testified about the devastating impact on their family. He spoke about how they had trusted Ortega completely, paying her fairly and treating her as part of their extended family. The betrayal was as shocking as the violence itself. The defense called multiple witnesses to testify about Ortega's mental state, including family members who admitted they had known about her depression and anxiety, but had hidden it from the Krims. Her son, Jesus Frias, testified that his mother loved the children, but his testimony backfired when he referred to the murders as an accident and was seen winking and grinning at the jury. During the trial, it was revealed that Ortega's family had provided false references when she was first hired. A family friend, Yoselyn Severino, had sent a fake letter of recommendation to help Ortega get the job. This deception meant the Krims never knew about Ortega's lack of proper childcare experience or her mental health struggles. After 6 weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached their verdict on April 18, 2018. They found Yoselyn Ortega guilty on all charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. The verdict was emotional for everyone in the courtroom, including the jurors, some of whom were seen crying. Kevin Krim later said he hugged as many jurors as he could after the verdict was read. The jury had rejected the insanity defense, finding that despite her mental health issues, Ortega knew right from wrong when she killed the children. On May 14, 2018, Ortega was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Gregory Caro called her pure evil and criticized both Ortega and her family for hiding her mental health conditions from the Krims and failing to seek proper medical treatment. During the sentencing hearing, Marina Krim delivered a powerful victim impact statement. She blamed not just Ortega, but what she called a conspiracy of an entire family of bad, evil people who had lied about Ortega's qualifications and hidden her mental health issues. She pointed out that not a single member of Ortega's family had ever reached out to express condolences for the murders. The impact of this case extends far beyond one family's tragedy. The Krims channeled their grief into advocacy, creating the Lulu and Leo Fund in their children's memory. The fund works to support arts and creativity programs for children, keeping their memory alive through positive action. More importantly for other families, the case led to legislative changes. New York lawmakers passed what became known as Lulu and Leo's Law, which strengthened background check requirements and care standards for domestic workers, including nannies. The law was designed to prevent other families from experiencing the Krims tragedy by ensuring better screening of childcare providers. The case also sparked broader conversations about the childcare industry. Many families began requiring more extensive background checks, references, and even psychological evaluations for nannies and babysitters. The idea of trusting a relative stranger with your most precious possessions, your children, suddenly seemed much more dangerous. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this case is how it highlights the vulnerability of children and the catastrophic consequences when that vulnerability is exploited by someone in a position of trust. Ortega wasn't a stranger who broke into the apartment. She was someone the family knew, trusted, and treated well. She had been caring for these children for 2 years. This raises uncomfortable questions that don't have easy answers. How do you protect your children while still maintaining some level of normal life? How do you balance the need for childcare with the reality that you can never truly know what's in another person's mind? How do you trust again after something like this happens? The psychological aspects of this case are particularly troubling. Experts have struggled to understand what could drive someone to harm children in their care. Some point to Ortega's untreated mental health issues, her financial pressures, and possible feelings of resentment toward the family she worked for. But millions of people struggle with depression, anxiety, and financial stress without committing murder. What made Ortega different? Was it a perfect storm of mental illness, hidden resentment, and opportunity? Or was there something deeper, something darker that no one saw coming? The truth is, we may never fully understand what drove her to commit such a horrific act. Today, Ortega remains in prison, serving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. She will never be free again. The Krim family has had to rebuild their lives around an unimaginable loss. Marina and Kevin have had more children since the tragedy, but they will forever be marked by what happened on that October afternoon in 2012. The case serves as a stark reminder that evil can hide behind the most ordinary facades. Ortega wasn't a monster in appearance. She was a middle-aged woman who seemed reliable and trustworthy. She had worked for the family for 2 years without incident. There were warning signs, but they were subtle and largely hidden by her family's deception. For parents, this case represents every nightmare rolled into one. The person you trust to protect your children becomes the person who harms them. Your own home, the place that should be safest, becomes a crime scene. The routine decisions you make every day, leaving one child, with the nanny while you take another to swimming, lessons suddenly carry unthinkable consequences. The Krim family's strength in the aftermath of this tragedy is remarkable. Rather than retreating from public life, they chose to honor their children's memory through advocacy and legislative change. Lulu and Leo's law stands as a testament to their determination to prevent other families from experiencing their loss, but laws and background checks can only do so much. At some level, childcare requires trust, and trust always involves risk. The Krim case shows us the devastating consequences when that trust is betrayed in the worst possible way. As we remember Lulu and Leo Krim, we're reminded that behind every true crime story are real people whose lives have been forever changed. This isn't just about understanding criminal psychology or legal proceedings. It's about a family that lost two beautiful children and somehow found the strength to turn their tragedy into something that might protect other children. The question that haunts many people about this case is simple but impossible to answer. How do you prevent the unpreventable? How do you guard against betrayal by someone you trust? The uncomfortable truth is that you can't, not completely. You can do background checks, check references, and follow your instincts, but ultimately, caring for children requires some level of trust in other people. What makes this case even more disturbing is how normal everything seemed on the surface. Ortega had been working for the Krims for 2 full years. She knew these children's routines, their favorite foods, their bedtime stories. She had changed Leo's diapers and helped Lulu with her homework. She had been there for birthday parties and family dinners. To outside observers, she appeared to be a devoted caregiver who genuinely cared about the children. But beneath that surface, something much darker was brewing. Court documents revealed that Ortega had been increasingly resentful about her working conditions. She complained to family members about feeling overworked and underpaid, despite the Krims paying her above-average wages for part-time work. She felt that Marina Krim was too demanding and that she was being treated more like a servant than a valued employee. The prosecution argued that this resentment had been building for months before the murders. They presented evidence that Ortega had been discussing her unhappiness with her job with family members, but never directly addressed these concerns with the Krims themselves. Instead, she allowed her anger to fester and grow into something much more dangerous. Mental health experts who examined the case noted that Ortega's depression and anxiety, combined with her feelings of resentment and financial pressure, created what they called a perfect storm of psychological factors. But they were quick to point out that millions of people experience these same pressures without committing violence, let alone murdering children. What separated Ortega from other struggling caregivers was her willingness to cross a line that most people could never even imagine approaching. The brutality of the attacks, multiple stab wounds to small children, showed a level of violence that went far beyond a momentary loss of control. This was sustained, deliberate violence against the most vulnerable victims possible. The ripple effects of this case continue to be felt throughout New York City and beyond. Many families completely overhauled their approach to childcare in the wake of the murders. Some hired security companies to conduct extensive background checks that go far beyond standard employment screening. Others installed hidden cameras throughout their homes to monitor caregivers when parents aren't present. The psychological impact on other nannies and childcare workers was also significant. Many reported feeling like they were under constant suspicion from employers who had previously trusted them completely. Some families began conducting surprise visits home during the day, or asking neighbors to keep an eye on their homes when nannies were working. Child development experts warned that this increased surveillance and suspicion could actually harm children by creating an atmosphere of distrust and anxiety in their own homes. They argued that while safety measures are important, children need to feel secure and loved by their caregivers, which becomes difficult when parents are constantly monitoring and questioning every interaction. The insurance industry also took note of this case. Some homeowners' insurance policies now include specific coverage for crimes committed by domestic employees, and several companies began offering specialized policies for families who employ nannies or other household staff. The recognition that trusted employees could pose a significant risk led to new categories of coverage that didn't exist before 2012. From a legal perspective, The case raised important questions about employer liability when hiring domestic workers. While the Krims were clearly victims in this situation, some legal experts wondered whether families could be held partially responsible if they failed to conduct adequate background checks or ignored warning signs about an employee's mental health or behavior. The defense's strategy during the trial revealed just how desperate Ortega's legal team was to find any explanation for her actions. They brought in multiple psychiatrists who diagnosed her with various mental health conditions, including major depression, anxiety disorders, and possible psychotic episodes. They argued that her mental illness was so severe that she couldn't understand the nature and consequences of her actions, but the prosecution's psychiatric experts disagreed. They acknowledged that Ortega suffered from mental health issues, but argued that she knew exactly what she was doing when she killed the children. They pointed to evidence that she had planned the attack, choosing knives from the kitchen and positioning the children's bodies in a specific way after the killings. The jury ultimately agreed with the prosecution. After hearing weeks of testimony about Ortega's mental state, they concluded that she was legally responsible for her actions. The fact that she immediately attempted suicide after the murders actually worked against her defense. As prosecutors argued, it showed she knew what she had done was wrong. During the penalty phase of the trial, more disturbing details emerged about Ortega's relationship with the Krim family. Marina Krim testified that she had sometimes felt uncomfortable with Ortega's behavior in the months leading up to the murders. She described subtle changes in the nanny's demeanor. She seemed more distant and sometimes appeared angry for no apparent reason. But like many employers, Marina had attributed these changes to normal workplace stress and had tried to be understanding and supportive. She never imagined that Ortega's mood changes were signs of something much more dangerous brewing beneath the surface, the revelation that Ortega's family had actively deceived the Krims about her. Background and qualifications added another layer of betrayal to the case. Not only had they lost their children to someone they trusted, but they discovered that this trust had been built on lies from the very beginning. Yoselyn Severino, the family friend who had provided fake references for Ortega, was never charged with a crime, but her actions contributed to a tragedy that could have been prevented with honest communication about Ortega's mental health struggles and lack of proper childcare experience. The Krim family's decision to turn their tragedy into advocacy work has been both inspiring and heartbreaking to watch. Marina Krim has spoken publicly about her children, sharing memories and photos that show them as the vibrant, loving children they were before their lives were cut short. She refuses to let their memory be defined solely by the violence of their deaths. The Lulu and Leo Fund has supported numerous arts and creativity programs for children, reflecting the interests and talents that Lulu and Leo were just beginning to discover when they died. The fund serves as a living memorial that creates positive experiences for other children while honoring the memory of the two who were lost. But perhaps the most lasting impact of this case has been on how society thinks about trust, vulnerability, and the protection of children. The Krim murders forced many people to confront uncomfortable truths about the risks we take every day. When we allow others to care for our most precious possessions, our children, the case also highlighted the complex intersection of mental health, employment, and criminal justice. While Ortega's mental health issues were real and serious, they didn't excuse or explain away the deliberate choice to harm innocent children. The jury's rejection of the insanity defense sent a clear message that mental illness, no matter how severe, doesn't automatically absolve someone of responsibility for violent crimes. As we look back on this case more than a decade later, it's clear that the Krim family tragedy changed more than just laws and background check procedures. It changed how many people think about trust, security, and the fundamental vulnerability that comes with being human in a world where we must sometimes rely on others. The children who died in this case, Lulu and Leo Krim, deserve to be remembered not just as victims, but as the bright, beautiful children they were. They loved art and music and stories. They brought joy to everyone who knew them. They trusted the adults in their lives to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed in the most horrific way possible. Their parents have shown remarkable strength in channeling their grief into positive action that might prevent other families from experiencing similar losses. But no amount of advocacy or legislative change can bring back two children who should be teenagers now, discovering who they want to become and what they want to do with their lives. This is the reality of violent crime. It doesn't just take lives, it steals futures, destroys families, and forces entire communities to confront their own vulnerability. The Krim case reminds us that evil can hide behind the most ordinary appearances, and that the price of misplaced trust can be everything that matters most in the world. In a society where we must rely on others to help us care for our children, work in our homes, and support our daily lives, the Krim tragedy stands as both a warning and a call to action. We cannot eliminate all risk, but we can work to minimize it through better screening, honest communication, and a commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The legacy of Lulu and Leo Krim lives on in the law that bears their names, in the fund that supports other children's creative development, and in the countless families who have taken extra precautions to protect their own children. Because of what happened in that Manhattan apartment on October 25, 2012, their story is a reminder that behind every crime statistic are real people whose lives have been forever changed, and that the responsibility to protect the innocent belongs to all of us.